So why don't you think we do that?
We didn't have access to the information at first, but now we do.
We
So
do though. We do now though.
we're trying to do that with our kids now. I think the people you've never heard generational wealth more in any generation of us than now. You never heard financial literacy is key more than you hear it now. We you hear credit conventions and people trying to discuss these things, even if they're not masters at what they're doing. They know the information exists and people are seeking it. It's why a 19 Keys is popular or a Earn Your Leisure is popular. Like people are reaching out for this information. Is it to the extent that everyone knows? I think everyone is aware. I don't think everyone has actually looked into it to know. But look, I grew up in a generation where a black president was impossible. Like we believe that there'll never be a black president. These kids who were in high school post Obama, they're different than us in a lot of ways. A lot of different things that we didn't feel were possibilities. It seems that they view as possibilities, and it may come off weird, but I think it's a lot of them finding their way. Like, 'cause they'll do things that in my generation we never would have done, good or bad. But I think it's more of a spectrum for them to try and find their way. So I think we're witnessing that come of age now for the next like 10 to 20 years. We'll be seeing that.
Yeah, I personally think that when it comes to this whole thing, why we don't do it, it just is not enough of us that actually do it. Like most people, a lot of black people struggle. A lot of people in general struggle. So the people that I'm speaking of, like when I was talking about those Italians and those them Jewish people, like they grow up in a household where this is the thing they see all the time. They see the connection between all the other people that look like them that are doing the same thing their parents are doing, whether they're doctors or whatever. They grow up in an environment where it's normal and they see it all of the time. If majority of black people aren't in those kind of environments and see those connections, that see these environments like on a consistent basis from when you're a kid all the way up until this point, like more times than not, you're only going to focus on the things that you feel like are reachable. And a lot of things that black people feel like are reachable is more so entertainment, more so than anything else.
Go ahead,
So,
Ina.
so I don't completely agree with that last part, right? I think that's just the thing that gets pushed in front of people because there's a multitude of black doctors, there's a multitude of black lawyers. I think it's one of those things where you kind of just have to look a little harder for that inspiration. But I did want to say this to Shane's question as well. There are so many times where black people have done it, kind of to what the example Marcus gave, and people dismantle what has been built. We've seen that historically, we've seen that on an individual basis. I think it's very disheartening for a lot of people of what am I doing this for if it can't be sustained? I think that's the obstacle that we don't talk about honestly enough. I think a lot of times we talk about of like it's one of two camps where people say, oh, it's a post-racial society. You just need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just do it. Just kind of unrealistic. And then the total other end of that spectrum is anything is possible and you can do anything. It's also unrealistic, right? There are obstacles, and there are more obstacles for people who are black than there are for other people. I'm not saying other people don't have obstacles. There's just more for us. And for whatever reason, those obstacles tend to be higher as well. So that type of determination to go through that, I don't think everybody's equipped for that. Whether it's starting at home or at school or whatever your life experiences are, it's just more challenging for people who look like us. And I think that's the thing that people aren't prepared for. I don't think people are afraid to work because if anything, we see a whole lot of black people working 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. They're not afraid to work. I think they're just afraid to fail and just don't know how to overcome obstacles bigger than they imagined.
So my question, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I can tell you it's a lot easier than it was in the 60s and the 70s, and those people pulled through just fine. And nothing's going to be easy. We're still in the place. We were slaves just not too many years ago. We've had more time being segregated against than we have being free, right? So it's not going to be easy right now. We're still in that place where we're trying to get there, right? But to say we should just give up, what if we would have just gave up 50 years ago, 60 years ago? You know, so I just feel like that's the excuse. To me, that's an excuse.
I also think part of the problem is the lack of, I guess, what Inaz was saying, the level of ignorance behind certain occupations to choose. And I think for us, that is our biggest problem, is the lack of planning ahead, or having a plan in place. Like even if you go to college, a lot of times we're going to college and still have no idea what we're going to college for. We just know that is supposed to be the next natural step after you graduate high school. And so then we waste time in college because we're trying to figure things out, right? Because we don't have a specific plan in place. So I think a lot of times that's what happened, even on the collegiate side of things. But even in the workforce, I think that's the other part. We know we don't want to go to college, so we just work. But we don't have a plan for, okay, I'm not going to go to college. What's going to be my game plan? Because ideally, this is what I want to do with my life. I think we're more so kind of just figuring things out as we go along, and hopefully something to stick. And sometimes it works out, but I think most of the time it doesn't. So I think in that part, if we can begin to focus on, even if it's a trade, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like you said, not trying to be on the technical side of the trade. You want to be the skilled side where you can make more money. And then the more of us that get in those positions, then we'll have more people that can vouch for us to pull others up. But if everybody is trying to kind of stay in that technical aspect just so they can have a job, just to work, then, so it's the strategic planning part that makes most of the sense that we don't do.
Right.
We're trying to live, for the most part, live day to day. I think when you are not in a space where you have a lot of money, so to speak, or, can move, you're just trying to get day to day, pay these bills, whatever way I can get this money, I'm going to get this money so I can, survive. So when you're always in survival mode, it's very difficult to think ahead. I'm not saying it can't be done, but most people, when they're in that position, they're not thinking ahead. They're just trying to live day to day.